Carol, thank you very much indeed. It is 11 minutes past 8. You're watching Breakfast. Now, a study of top-level rugby players has found they face a much greater risk of developing brain conditions such as dementia, Parkinson's and motor neuron disease.
Now, this work was carried out by the same Glasgow University that identified a higher risk of the same conditions among footballers and has prompted calls for faster action by all contact sports to try to reduce the risks to players. Our health correspondent Dominic Hughes has more.
FP5. Down.
Playing contact sport like rugby always comes with an element of risk. But in recent years, there have been growing concerns over what effect repeated head impacts might have on the brain. Now, a new study throws fresh light on the risks to the brain health of top-level rugby players. Researchers looked at the medical records of more than 400 Scottish rugby players who'd represented their country. They compared them to 1,200 matched members of the public. They found the rugby players faced more than twice the risk of developing neurodegenerative diseases such as dementia, Parkinson's or motor neuron disease.
All sport has to question its relationship with head injuries and head impacts, and rugby, is doing that. Rugby is trying to figure out ways to improve the game to reduce the risks of head injuries and head impacts. I think it's a slow pace of change, and I think data like this today suggests that the pace of change should be as quick as possible, because there are currently young men and women who are participating in a sport where we're concerned about risks going down the line.
A study by the same Glasgow University team led to concerns about the effects that repeatedly heading a ball might have on the brains of professional footballers. And as the evidence of a link between head impacts and illness grows, campaigners are calling for sports ruling bodies to move faster.
We need to change how we play these games to minimize the repetitive hits to the head. That means changing how we practice. That means fewer drills that involve head impacts. That means changing the rules when we identify rules that can be changed that would minimize the number of hits to the head. And that also means at the pro level, we're no longer playing 11 months a year with your league years and then your international tours. That's where we're learning from people like Steve Thompson that that's too many hits to the head and can destroy your mental well-being by your 40s. And nobody is going to step forward to keep playing this game once we realize how widespread this is.
In a statement, World Rugby said it welcomed the latest research and was engaged in a constant and open conversation about what changes to the game may be appropriate. But some will ask how a game like professional rugby that thrives on collisions between heavily built players can eliminate the risk of concussion and head impacts without changing the very nature of the game itself. Dominic Hughes, BBC News.
We are joined now by former England hooker Steve Thompson, part of that World Cup winning side of 2003. Steve was diagnosed with early onset dementia back in 2020. Morning, Steve.
Morning.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Watching that piece, we just watched it together, and seeing you here today, the first thing I need to ask you is, how are you? How are you at the moment?
Yeah, not too bad. Started some new medication and that, which has really helped. And yeah, Steph, my wife's running my life really, to be honest. And it's taken 2 years, but we've found out to sort of get the best me, really, for me, the kids and friends and family. So we can't do as much as I was before, but it's all about trying to educate and help others as well.
What are those little changes then that you and Steph have managed to get at home that have helped?
We call it the Nokia battery. That's what Dr. Gavin Newby taught me, that my brains now is like an old Nokia battery. Remember when you plug them in and it used to be 12-hour charge and it only worked for an hour, and that's really what my mind's like at the moment. So if we do something, I have to have a sleep afterwards. If we have a big day, I don't know, a wedding or something on the Saturday, and there's a christening, I won't be able to go to the christening on the Sunday. We just got to pick and choose what we do, and then we sort of get the best sort of me for everyone else.
You have chosen, haven't you, to tell your story very publicly. You've shared this with documentary makers, and we can see this film, which is really like personal access to what you're going through at the moment. Why did you want to do that?
Just for everyone else. When we sort of came out and we said, Steph and I sat down, and we'd been quite private people, we hadn't been in the media and things like that, and even through my playing career there's not much of me outside of the actual rugby. So we just knew there was a problem. There was 3 of us that had come out, and then all of a sudden there's 7. Now there's over 200, and what by doing this documentary, we just want to help others of ways. One, showing that you can sort of live through it, and another thing is there are things out there and ways and means of support networks for people and their family.
Should we just have a look at a clip from the documentary before we speak further?
Yeah, you look at it and you think it's all nice medals and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's why I am now. I'm struggling a bit, so it's a little bit emotional about it, to be honest. Like, you see all this stuff and people say, "Oh, was it worth it?" And I say, no, it wasn't, because I'd rather not be such a burden on the family.
Wow, that's quite something to hear you say. Was it worth it? No, it wasn't. Why, when you look at those pictures now, what do you feel about the rugby shirts and the medals that you have?
I feel absolutely nothing. It's weird. I see the younger ones when I was like 17. I get goosebumps and that when I see them and that. But the actual international ones and everything, I just feel nothing. I just feel empty. There's no goosebumps. There's no excitement because there's no memory of it. Like, literally, there's just nothing at all. And like I said, when I look at it, I just think it's someone else's. And I do feel like, like I say on there, like a bit of a phony. I feel like I'm not. When people talk to me about it, I don't want to be horrible and one of them that say, "Oh no, I don't want to talk about it." It's not that. It's just I can't talk about it, and I feel a bit embarrassed about it. And the people say, "Oh, it's their dream to do it," and say that I've done it, and I've just got nothing there. And would I do it? No, I wouldn't do it again if I was given the option. And you hear some people say, "Oh, I can't believe I'm putting my wife, my family, my friends through this," and they get asked the question, "Would you do it again?" "Oh yeah, I'll do it again." To me, I'm a bit like, well, I wouldn't. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be where I am now. I'd give all that up and just have a normal life.
When you hear this new research this morning that's come out of University of Glasgow about the impact of playing the sport on many rugby players, what do you make of that? I guess it just confirms what...
It's just horrendous when you look at it. You got your Rob Burrow, Ed Slater, Doddy Weir with MMD. I'm really scared because it's just getting worse, and we've only scratched the surface. If there's hundreds, there's going to be thousands, and it is really worrying. And that how it's been kept so quiet for so long. There's been a problem there, and it's just been bubbling away, and now it's just burst. And people like Alex Popham, who's just been phenomenal. He's just been leading from the front, and you look at that, and he's kept everyone going. And when we look at it, hopefully, by us coming out, we've helped lots of people. I had 3 people contact me last weekend that they're struggling. Marriages are splitting up and that, but now they can understand that there is a problem, and you can have the scans, you can see the damage, and suddenly there's a reason for it. So once you see that, you can have a plan. You can say, right, this is the problem, and people's lives can be saved, and families and friends can be saved.
Can I just check the 3 people who contacted you last weekend? They're rugby players.
One was amateur, and then there's 2 that were semi-pro.
And I imagine a lot of the people who've played perhaps don't want that diagnosis, so they perhaps don't want to talk to a doctor or go and have a scan. But it's interesting that you say that actually going and having that confirmation is something that you now know it helped you because it put you on the next step of the journey.
Definitely. I was in denial at first when the tests were going on, and suddenly when I got the diagnosis, I was relieved. There was a massive relief, but then suddenly I'm hit with massive guilt that what am I putting my wife, my kids through? And you're there and you just think, what have I done? Whereas now, because we've come up with different ways of living life, we're getting the best out of it. And we've got to look at ways to work. We've got to look, so I'm looking at setting up a foundation, and it's not for the sport, it's for people outside of sport really, because it's the friends and family that really get it. But then also it's someone that's like myself. You get turned down for jobs and things like that. How could you work? But we want to speak to job recruiters and say, look, let's get these people with a bit more, self-respect really, because you do lose your dignity in that, because you're just like, what can I do? You're just like empty and there's nothing there. And all of a sudden, if you can just work a little bit, you can get back into some sort of normality. You sort of get a bit more self-respect. And like I said, there's going to be thousands of us. And the worrying thing is the care home situation as well, because we're big lads and suddenly there's not enough space as it is. It's expensive, and are they going to be able to get people into the care homes that are 40 years old, 50 years old? Because that's what's happening. People are being diagnosed in their 30s at the moment.
Steve, what have you been told? How have they been able to tell you about how rugby affected your early onset dementia and about that connection?
Well, it's been there for about 100 years. But when you look into it, you know, all the papers and that, you know, that's what frustrates me at times when they say, oh, we need more studies, there's information there which should have been acted on a long time ago. So when you look at that, you know, sorry, what did you say then? Sorry,
No, I was just wondering about what you're told when you got your diagnosis of early onset dementia. Were they able to be absolutely categoric that it was caused by your rugby, or how far are they able to go?
When you've got 2 or 3,
Yeah.
you suddenly look at when you've got hundreds, and you look at it, and then it's not just the rugby players; it's all the contact sports around the world. You know, you see Chris earlier from the States from the NFL. You know, you got rugby league, you got Australian rules. You know, you look at that, and when you look at the scans, they're all the same. You can see the damage, and and it's not the big concussions as such; it's the small sub-concussions that's really causing the probable CTE. And when you look at that, they're looking at 100,000 sub-concussions that happened throughout my career.
And when you watch, I don't know, do you ever watch kids playing rugby now? When you watch young people playing rugby, that must be a really difficult thing for you to do. What should be happening in the game now?
Well, you've got to be looking at the contact, especially at a young age. And, I've got some great mates that have got kids that are playing tackle rugby now and things. And I do worry because it's such a significant period of time in their life, from the 12s to 16s, 18s. So if they're getting brain injuries, because that's exactly what's happening, it's brain injuries, they talk concussion, they try and come up with words, I think, so it doesn't sound too bad, but it's a brain injury. And suddenly, imagine that for someone schooling, it could really hurt it. And, you look at touch rugby and things like that and ways of keeping fit, and people go, oh, you've gone soft, it's ridiculous. We're not, it's coming out now. And the problem is, where the game's gone professional, it's coming all the way down through the game, through the generation, and also through to the grassroots. They even do systems in touch rugby for defence. Rather than the little kids just running around, passing the ball, learning skills, it's all about a defensive line. It's about breaking that line. It's touch rugby, it's little kids. But junior coaches, I've got so much respect for them, because on a Sunday morning when it's freezing cold, raining, they're looking after other people's kids. They're giving other kids the possibility of getting out there, running around, having fun. We just need to educate them, help them out, keep the kids fit but healthy.
World Rugby, the RFU, the WRU have issued a joint statement. They say we care deeply about all our players. We never stand still when it comes to welfare. Our strategies to prevent, identify and manage head injuries are driven by a passion to safeguard our players and founded on the latest science, evidence and independent expert guidance. Enough?
Yeah, I obviously can't say too much with the case going on, but you can see what's coming out now already, and it's for years and years, every 5 years or 10 years, it's been close to bubbling and coming out, and all of a sudden it's just stopped for some reason. It hasn't, whereas now it is, and like you said, we're not going to stop. There's all the different sports, and Dawn Astle has been phenomenal with the football. She's just, excuse the phrase, dog with a bone. She's like amazing, and there's so many people that you could talk to. Rob Burrow, what he's going through and stuff, and there's so many people that stand up. And the UK is such a great country for sponsorship, looking after people, just giving pages and all this, but it shouldn't happen. We shouldn't have to stand out there in this situation with cap in hand, begging that we're going to be looked after. It's just not right, and it's got to be put in place. And for me, there's so much that can be done and so much more to be done. Progressive Rugby are really standing up, they're lobbying for the players, and we want to save the game because it is a tremendous game. I take my kids down to the local junior rugby club, Winnington, and it's such a good place to be, like the way the people are. But do you watch the contact in games now? I sort of look away now because it is worrying what's going on. But still, there's a way we've got to try and make it survive.
Steve, it is such a pleasure to talk to you this morning. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us about this, and really interesting to hear. I know lots of people say that, if you complain about what's happened to you, you're perhaps trying to change the game and stop it happening. That's not what you're saying at all, is it?
No, not at all. Like I said, we want to keep this going.
Yeah. Steve, thank you so much.
And we wish you all the very best. Thanks so much for being so open with all of us. I know a lot of people will be affected by Steve's story, and you can watch the whole documentary we're talking about. We saw an extract from it. It's called Head On: Rugby, Dementia and Me. It's on BBC Two and on the iPlayer tonight at 9 o'clock.
It's 26 minutes past 8. It's time to get the news, the travel and the weather where you are.